Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. My guest today on Better Than I Found It is South Carolina men's golf coach Rob Bradley. Rob's path to the coaching profession came after an All-American career at North Carolina and then a 7-year career on the Korn Ferry Tour. Although he was 2 years older than Tiger, he had numerous occasions to play with Tiger in junior golf and college golf, and he describes what that was like for him. Following the 2008 Korn Ferry season, he was hired by Scott Schroeder at the University of North Florida, and Rob hasn't looked back. He recently completed his first year at South Carolina, following an 11-year stint as head man at Purdue, where he brought the program to new heights. A great player himself, Rob likes to keep things simple when working with his players. I really respect what he has accomplished in the game. I think you will too. Enjoy the listening. Okay, Better Than I Found It, faithful. I'm honored to welcome today's guest, University of South Carolina men's golf coach Rob Bradley. Rob, what a pleasure to have you on Better Than I Found It today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Coach.
Yeah, it was really good seeing you last week at Trinity Forest. I don't even know if we ran into each other at all this past season. Great seeing you there, and I trust your recruiting was fruitful.
Yeah, it was great. Other than the that Dallas heat was for real, but we had a fun few days out there recruiting on two really good golf courses. So
yeah, Trinity Forest always in great shape. Not a speck of shade out there for sure. The name is a misnomer because the forest is around the course, not on the course. But
no doubt.
But it played really, really well. I love the golf course this week, but I think Brook Hollow kind of showed well as also. It's a great test of golf and probably played a little harder, I think, than Trinity Forest.
Yeah, I thought so too. I really enjoyed the walk around Brook Hollow. I thought it was a great place to recruit. A lot of really good holes. Thought you had to have control over your golf ball to play well out there for sure. So it was kind of fun to watch.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk recruiting for a minute before we get into I want to talk about your career, all the twists and turns and all the success you've had. But before we do that, recruiting has changed with the college landscape and everything that's changed especially over the last 5 to 7 years. It's changed drastically since you came up when you were coming through in the mid to late 90s or in the 1990s. I think some changes have been okay. That's fine. But I think a lot of them aren't very good for our profession. And you and I were talking about it on the practice tee there at Trinity Forest. There's a lot of things. I don't want to be negative, but there's a lot of things that aren't great about what's going on in the college golf world.
Yeah, I think, overall now with the transfer portal, has certainly, the transfer portal and, NIL, the way it was the last couple of years, I think has really been, an interesting piece in athletics. And, hopefully with this House settlement, they've kind of figured a way to slow this down and get back to what it was really intended to be for. But yeah, it definitely has changed, with the transfer portal. I think, it's pretty amazing now when when you go in and look at the number of athletes in the portal and most of them, most of the players really know where they're going before they even go in the portal, which is, I think, a little bit probably the most concerning.
Yeah, I think that would lend itself toward tampering, which I think has gone on. It's almost impossible to prove because there's so many different people that have been spoken to up in a cloud someplace to get that information to the student athlete. That hey, if you just got in the portal, there'd be a spot waiting for him on school XYZ. So I'm not here to accuse anybody, but I know what's going on, and that's the part about it I really don't like. I don't think we're sending a very good message to our players.
Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth with it a little bit. I struggle with, I think, when you look at coaches, that can move, from job to job and go to, a so-called better situation, and that's what some of these players, essentially are doing. But I just, it seems like the way that it's happening is a little suspect. But it's a tough one because coaches are allowed to, to go and take a better job, and it's essentially what a lot of these players are doing. But so I don't know. I go back and forth in my head. You're out there recruiting all summer, and you're working hard every week, looking for players and giving players opportunities, and a lot of times they'll play well and then move on to another school. And I don't know. That's kind of tough.
Yeah, it's tough. I guess that's where we are. Here we are. So we'll just deal with it. And honestly, regardless of what the rules are or regardless of what's going on, you still have to adapt, and you have to be a different coach probably every year to adapt and adjust to what's happening. So I think a young guy like you probably does a pretty good job of that. Maybe I've got to do a better job of it going forward. I still consider you young, by the way.
That's good. I don't get that a lot, especially from my players.
Well, they never got to see you play either. That's a problem, because I did get to see you play. And a lot of times on this podcast, when I'm talking to a coach or a player, I like to go back to when I first saw that player or that coach or met them or whatever. And yours is kind of interesting. I was a high school golf coach in Edmond, Oklahoma, and you were playing the Rolex AJGA Rolex Tournament of Champions in Edmond at Oak Tree Country Club. And that's the first time I saw you. And you were battling one of my players, Chris Edgman, in the final round at Oak Tree East. What are your memories of that week? What do you remember?
I remember I didn't have a lot of opportunities to play AJGA stuff growing up. And, I remember playing a few events in the Northeast and playing pretty well. And that, got me into the Rolex event. And I remember, it was kind of one of the first places I was really being recruited. I remember having conversations with Coach Holder and Coach Browse out at the Rolex, and I remember playing really well and having the lead over Chris Edgman going into that back nine. And unfortunately, like sometimes things happen in golf, it wasn't my best effort on the back nine at Oak Tree that week. I think I shot maybe 42 on the back to lose by a shot, maybe.
Yeah,
But
you had a pretty good lead. But
yeah, I
I'll
had a
give you a
pretty
little
good
credit.
lead.
I played the Oklahoma Open there a few years. When the wind blows on that back nine, holes 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 are all brutal because there's water and out of bounds and all kinds of things going on. And I know your ball found some bad spots on that last nine, but I do
Yeah.
remember thinking that kid's a pretty good player. And I wasn't aware that Mike Holder talked to you that week, but he didn't get you. Devin Browse did. So there you go, Mike Holder.
That's right. That's right. I
And
still remember him coming up to me and telling me that, the way he recruited was to look at guys on the range and kind of put a check mark next to their names. And he said normally, they didn't play very good, but that day he had put in a check mark next to my name and I played well. So he was pleasantly surprised and wanted to talk to me. It's funny how I don't have, I could probably remember that conversation even a little better than the golf that week. But it's kind of funny the things that stick out to you.
yeah, well, he was sort of an iconic figure anyway, so I'm sure that made an impact on you. But no, that's when I first met you, first saw you, and then obviously years later, um, I didn't get to see your college career because I was still a high school coach, but I do remember I do remember when you got to North Florida to work for Scott Schroeder, which we're going to talk about in a second. But you one thing you had to deal with in your teens was you lost your father at a pretty early age. Were you 14 or 15 when that happened?
Yeah, I was 15. Yep.
Yeah, that's a tough thing for any 15-year-old to do, and I know that probably uh, rocked your world at the time. But did any male figure, role model step in at the time, and if so, who was that person?
I've been pretty fortunate in my life. My high school golf coach, was there for me at that time, and then Devin Browse, and it just seems like, throughout my life, I've had a lot of influential people, when I've really needed somebody to help me, that have stepped up and really helped me through those things. But certainly my high school golf coach and Coach Browse were definitely there, at that time for sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm sure you played a lot of golf with your dad's memory in there. I'm certain. Did he have any effect on your golf growing up as a kid?
Yeah, he did. So he had me pretty late in life. He had me when he was 52, and he took an early retirement plan. So he kind of taught me the game, and we played a lot of golf in my early years, and then he started getting sick probably when I was 12 or 13. So not as much golf, but he was certainly there for the tournaments that he could be there for, and taught me a lot.
That's great. That's great. Well, you mentioned Devin Browse, a GCA Hall of Famer, and obviously you had two sort of times with Devin. We're going to talk about both of them, but you were a two-time All-American for him at North Carolina. And I talked to him before this interview, and I said, so what things stood out about you, Rob? And he goes, well, the first thing that stands out is a 65 he shot at Shoal Creek to win. Well, it was the first round of the Jerry Pate Intercollegiate in 1995, and he said that round was a man-sized round. That was a PGA Tour round right there. What do you remember about that round? You didn't play as well the last two rounds, but still won the golf tournament. That's a
Yeah, I
pretty
think
low
I
score at Shoal
I
Creek.
think I had a 7 shot lead actually after the first round that week. I do remember it playing really tough and just kind of one of those days where everything came together. So that was pretty special. That was my first win in college too that week. So that was pretty cool on a great golf course, obviously.
Obviously, a great golf course. Well, Devin paid you a compliment, and I had to double take when he said this. He said, and he said, no, he did. He said he played with and against Tiger quite a bit. In my opinion, he was just as good at the time. Now, he was not trying to compare you with Tiger for a career or even talent wise or anything, but he felt like you really held your own against Tiger during that time. What do you remember about playing with Tiger and competing?
I remember I probably played with him, a dozen times in junior golf. I obviously remember how incredible he was, and I remember telling friends of mine that used to come watch me. I'd typically have, because my dad wasn't around, it seemed like there were either guys from my club or somebody that would travel with me to kind of help me out in junior golf. And I remember telling them to go watch Tiger if I wasn't paired with him, and just what a special talent he was. I don't know what this says about my golf career, but I will say I really felt like my game was probably in the best spot throughout junior golf. I don't know what happened after that, but I was a pretty confident junior golfer for sure. And it's just kind of golf. I mean, obviously, they just kind of couldn't get over the hump in the professional ranks. But certainly as a junior player, I don't think I played with a whole lot of fear, as most kids don't.
Well, I kind of think we almost speak fear into kids' careers, whether it's parents that talk to them about a bad round of golf, or whether it's a swing coach that might be giving them too much technique or something. Sometimes kids don't know to be afraid of something until they're taught to be afraid. I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah, I
probably just
agree with that. I
you
think
do.
that happens a lot in instruction these days, to be honest. I mean, when coming up in the junior golf ranks, I don't ever remember hearing another player, talk about not being able to chip, or, somebody having the chip yips or anything like that. It was just kind of, you went to the range or you went to the short game area and just dug it out of the dirt. And I think now there's so much information and instruction out there that people are starting to get bogged down a little bit. Instead of going and figuring it out, they're just going for hours of lessons, and getting a lot of thoughts in their head. And I think even to this day, one thing I try and do is keep it simple for our guys, and try
And
and stay away from some of that.
yeah, you mentioned two-way, chip yips, but two-way miss. We didn't have that in 1975. You just
Yeah.
you just hit draws, and sometimes you drew it too much, but you didn't miss it both ways, and that seems like that's been a direct result of over instruction. I
Yeah.
don't feel like it has been, but
Yeah. I would agree with you for sure.
Devin told me, he said, you can't believe how natural of a golfer Rob was. He was a supreme talent, but at one point he said Rob probably got a little too technical. And here's his quote from Devin. He said, I did have to ban him from the driving range at one point in time because he was trying to be too technical, which was not anything like he normally was. His game was and is very simple. At his best, he never thought or worried about his golf swing. Do you remember that time when you might have been getting a little, or when he banned you from the range?
I do. I think I won twice that semester actually that he banned me from the range. And I did like to tinker a little bit. And I definitely, looking back on that, I for sure saw the value in, getting my short game better and going and playing golf. Because I mean, to this day, it's what I love to do is get out there and play and, just try and shoot a score. So he certainly helped me get back on track for sure.
Well, so you've coached kids. You've been a head coach for 12 years now, I think, overall. You've
Yep.
coached kids that get too technical. Have you, from that experience you had with Devin, is there anything what do you say to a kid who's obsessed with his golf swing and technique?
I think we kind of set things up through practice and qualifying that probably work against that. I mean, we generally play, 4 days a week and compete and qualify. And a big part of our practice is, short game and wedge work and things like that. So, it's somewhat hard for guys, to really get. I think, at times it's maybe even worked against me. Those guys that, like to tinker and work on their golf swing are kind of like, coach, I want to go work on my golf swing. And, we're doing short game and wedge work and putting drills and different things like that. So, but I think, kind of what we do day in and day out, it's pretty hard to get like that. But, generally, I like to just try and help guys keep it simple, whether it's feels or different things that, either, have worked for me or things that I've learned from other players and, whatnot. It's just really trying to keep it as simple as possible.
I agree with that. You had a really good college career. You did it pretty much through what Devin described as just being a natural player, and you just played the game. And I think I've never seen a coach that loves playing the game as much as you. I really feel like that's the case. But you did play the nationwide tour, what it's called. It's now the Corn Ferry, obviously, in 1997, 2000 through 2004, and 2008. So you played 7 or 8 years professional golf. Played in a couple of U.S. Opens in 1997 and 2003. Uh, talk about that pro career. You said you missed. You didn't quite make it like you thought you were going to make it in professional golf, but you did play high level golf for a long time. What are some of your memories of that time, and who are some of the best players that you got to play with during those years?
I just, in general, I love playing golf. I love to compete. I still love to get out there and play with our players. And, overall, I just, I feel like I got really close, just couldn't kind of get over the hump. I think I started in first stage and made it to finals of Q school 6 times. So, I really felt like there was a lot of cases where, I was a round away or whatever from getting to where I wanted to be, but just could never quite get there. And, but, I really loved getting out there and playing and competing. I mean, really now when it's funny, I'll go on and watch the Champions Tour and almost every guy out there was playing, the Corn Ferry Tour back, back when I was playing because I just just turned 51, so I'm kind of seeing all the names that were playing at the same time of me out playing on the Corn Ferry Tour. So, but Tiger was certainly, playing with him, he was, just in a league of his own. I mean, just so much better than everybody else. Really fun to play with and to watch, honestly.
Who was the best player you played with on the Corn Ferry that actually made it big time in pro golf?
I played some with Bubba, played obviously some with Zach Johnson. Both of those guys had obviously have had great careers, both Masters winners. So, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, that is cool. You know, when you end up playing and you play with some professional golfers, uh, and then you quit and don't play anymore, and now you're coaching, you kind of follow those careers pretty closely, don't you? Because you're every time you see their name pop up on a leaderboard, you think, well, I remember playing with him here or there or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I've followed them, and now it's honestly fun to, follow players that I've coached or, have coached against. You'll meet all these guys along the way and pull for guys as they start their professional careers. Yeah, it's kind of can really go to all the tours now and either see guys that I've coached or played with or coached against, and you can kind of click on each tour and you've got somebody to pull for.
Yeah, you do for sure. Well, I talked to Scott Schroeder at North Florida about you as well because you were his assistant for 3 or 4 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 4 years.
4 years, and that's where I first kind of sort of met you when you were coaching. But he said he kind of made you into a little bit different coach. For him, he felt like the best value you could provide was playing golf with his team. And he said he liked having you play all the time. I mean, that had to be a pretty awesome job description, wasn't it?
It's pretty funny when I look at my coaching career. So I started with Scott, on the tail end of my playing career. I think even in 2007, I helped with the team, and then the guys convinced me to go back to Q school, and I ended up making it back to finals. So I played the next year, but and then went back after that. But you know. I was playing with some of the guys on his team out at TPC and just realized how much I enjoyed helping them with their games and course strategy and all of that stuff and just things that I've learned along the way and trying to pass that on to them. And it's really what got me into coaching. I was like, man, I'm really enjoying this. And I think Scott paid me about $5,000 the first year I worked at worked at UNF. So I was doing all kinds of stuff to try and figure out how to make it work being married with two kids. But he gave me that opportunity and really taught me a lot. Scott's a great guy and a great coach.
Yeah.
And it was a really neat opportunity. But yeah, most of the things I did there were playing with the guys and helping the guys with their games. And um, I'm probably getting a little ahead of the course here, but then when Jay Sewell called me about the Alabama job, he had a team that he felt like really just needed to get him to the first tee, and they were pretty darn good, and he was looking for somebody to come in and play a lot of golf with those guys, and I think he'll still tell you to this day that I was probably one of the worst assistant coaches he's ever had because he just brought me in to play golf with the big dogs and see what we could get out of them and
Yeah.
so it was a pretty neat opportunity for me because that was a really special team. But that's kind of been my career has been just helping guys develop and helping them, kind of figure things out with the game. I don't know that I've ever really done the work of a true assistant coach, unfortunately, for my bosses, as great as they are. But I certainly think I could have been a better assistant coach for sure.
Well, Scott did mention one player, Kevin Allen, that you worked with, and you guys made it to the NCAA championship at Riviera. But he said, and Kevin's playing still some really good golf on the mini tours. But talk about Kevin Allen. He said that you at first you looked at it and maybe didn't think he'd be a great player, and then all of a sudden you started working with him. He got better.
Yeah, so Kevin is just a kid that loved to compete. He loves golf. his work ethic was incredible. He'd be out there all the time. We'd have all kinds of short game competitions and putting competitions. Both of us loved to compete, and we just developed a great relationship. We'd play as much golf as we could play, and I think I learned as much from him as he learned from me, and just developed a special relationship. And he really helped me evolve as a coach. I've always been a sucker for a really good grip and really good fundamentals and kind of the textbook golf swing, and Kevin didn't really have any of those at the time. Had a really weak grip, and did some funny things with the club. But man, can he play! Still can to this day. And so I think that helped me get onto the side of you have to be able to shoot the scores, and Kevin could certainly do that for sure.
Yeah, he could. He still can. I've
Yeah.
seen his name pop up. But you mentioned working for Jay Sewell at Alabama, and so you and I have something very unique in common. We were both one and done national champions for Jay Sewell as his assistant coach. I contend with Jay. I told Jay, I said, I came in, I saved the program, we won the national championship, and then you fired me. And he always laughs, but my goodness, what a juggernaut of great players he had. And I missed Justin Thomas by less than a month, but you got to coach with, be with Justin for that year. Man, he had some
Yeah.
great players.
Just
Unbelievable.
yeah, the roster was incredible. Honestly, I mean, I look back and think about Lee Knox had won the Georgia State Amateur 2 years in a row and didn't even play for us. And just incredible team with Justin Thomas and Corey Whitsitt, Bobby Wyatt, Trey Mullinax, Scott Strohmeyer. I mean, just one after another of guys that really at any given time they teed it up, they could win. And that was a lot of fun. It kind
Most
of
people don't know the name Scott Strohmeyer, but he occasionally shot some pretty good scores for the Crimson Tide, but he absolutely bombed it. I haven't seen a guy that long very many times in golf.
one of the longest players I've ever been around, actually. He had morning classes, or sorry, he had, I think, a later class than most of the other guys on the team. So I played with him a lot in qualifying. I remember him saying to me, Coach, what do you think I need to do, to really take it to the next level? And I thought to myself and said to him, like, I think you need to learn to hit your 8 iron about 170. And he's like, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, Scott, you hit your wedge flies about 175. Like, I think you need to learn how to control your golf ball a little bit, because he hit it so far. I mean, it was fun to watch, but it was also crazy with how far he hit it by me when we'd go out there. I mean, he was hitting it 100 by me. I mean, I've never seen, to this day, I've never seen anything like it, how far he could hit it.
Well, going forward, there's going to be a whole lot more players like him than there are like you, because the game has gotten very, very long and explosive. It's sad that there's not going to be guys like you and Corey Pavin and Scott Verplank and Jeff Sluman, and that there's just less guys that hit it kind of straight and just play that game. I wish there was more. Do you think there's a place in college golf and amateur golf and professional golf for guys that don't hit it quite as far? Do you think there's still that guy out there?
I still think there's a place for it. I think, I don't know that you can be competitive every week, but there's certainly going to be golf courses, that are still going to work for you, because I think, you're going to have places where the rough's high, and, there's a premium on hitting the ball in the fairway and keeping the ball in the right place, throughout the golf course. So I still think there's a place for it, but you're right. I mean, the game has certainly changed. It's not going to be the norm anymore, for sure.
I want to thank Devin Browse for hiring you to Purdue, because when I needed a job, Jay Sewell came calling, and I think you had accepted the job at Purdue that morning, and Jay called me that evening, and I accepted right away. So I got to spend my 1 year in Alabama, and You got to admit, Jay Sewell is an interesting cat. He's a one of a kind coach, a wonderful guy, most passionate guy I think I've ever seen in coaching. Just loves it and gets emotional quite often.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He was a great boss to me. I learned so much from him. He does things the right way. He is a passionate coach. I've always thought, his players would run out in traffic for him. I mean, they know the minute they step foot in there that nobody cares about him like he does, and I give him a lot of props for that. He certainly pours everything he has into coaching, and he's a great person.
Absolutely. But your time in Alabama obviously yielded a national championship. I think you would have enjoyed the year had you guys not won the national championship. It was just a great bunch of guys, and getting to work for Jay was incredible. But you went to Purdue, worked there for 11 seasons. You guys had 9 regional appearances, 4 NCAA championship appearances. You coached 3 All-Americans, one you knew very well, 18 All Big Ten selections, sort of unprecedented success for Purdue. And so congratulations on a great career there. But you got to do something not a lot of coaches at a high level get to do, and that is you got to coach your son Cole. And before I talk about Cole, I mean, the obvious, most notable ones that I can come up with are Labron Harris at Oklahoma A&M or Oklahoma State, coached Labron Jr., Buddy Alexander at Florida, coached Tyson, his son, and Chuck Winstead at LSU coached his son Trey. I know there's more, but you got to coach Cole, who was, by the way, a tennis player. Tell me how you got him from tennis, a really good tennis player, to golf, and then let's talk about his career playing for you at Purdue.
Yeah, my wife played tennis at NC State, and both of our kids kind of grew up primarily playing tennis. Cole, was a really nice tennis player. He loved the sport. When I was working at North Florida, I was kind of giving lessons to Todd Martin on the side, who at the time was coaching Djokovic, and we would kind of trade out. I would give Todd golf lessons, and he would give Cole tennis lessons afterwards. So it was pretty cool that Cole's getting lessons from the same guy coaching Djokovic. So, but anyway, he really didn't have any interest in golf, and when I got the job at Purdue, I don't think tennis was as strong in Indiana. We were kind of paying college kids to hit with him, and he just kind of lost a little bit of interest and came to me his freshman year of high school in the wintertime and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to start playing golf." And I kind of looked at him like he was crazy. He had never really played before, and said, "Okay, but I thought you were going to play college tennis." And he's like, "No, no, I'm going to play college golf." And I'm like, "Well, you're a long ways away from playing college golf. You've never even played before." He played 5 straight years of competitive tennis from roughly 10 to 15. And now he's going to start playing golf. So I taught him on the simulator in the wintertime up there, and called the high school coach, told him, "Hey, my son wants to try out. Don't get the wrong impression here just because I'm the coach at Purdue. Don't think that he's going to be a very good golfer. He doesn't know the rules or anything." And he went out and did the tryout for the high school team. I think he shot 62 his first 9 holes, and the coach called me and said, "Boy, you're right. He doesn't know any of the rules. He has no idea what's going on out there." And I think he managed over the next couple rounds to kind of get the last spot on the team, and maybe played a couple JV matches his freshman year by the end of the spring. And then he kind of got to work, and he'd come to the golf course with me in the morning, and he'd kind of be there till dark working at it. And his sophomore year of high school, he won the Indiana State High School. So that was, that was pretty good work in a year's time. And it was all him. He was out there playing 36 or 54 holes a day. I remember playing with him saying, "Man, we're spending more time looking for your golf ball than we are playing golf right now. Come on, man, you got to learn how to hit it a little straighter." But he certainly loved it. And then, he actually, another funny story about him is Jake Amos was my assistant coach at the time. And Cole came home for dinner one night and said, "Hey, by the way," told my wife and I committed to Purdue today. And we kind of looked at each other like, "You did what?" And he said, "Yeah, I committed to Coach Amos today." I said, "How did that go down?" And he said, "Oh, we were talking about it." And he looked at me and said, "Cole, are you really not going to play for your dad in college? Come on, what are you waiting on here?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're right." So he said, "I committed to Purdue today." So that was pretty
That
funny.
that has to be a first ever. that
Yeah,
the head coach, who's the father of this boy, he committed to the assistant coach.
that's right.
That's crazy. But you're never going to coach another player who was shooting 62 in his freshman year in high school that wins a state high school and becomes an All-American. That's not going to happen again.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild story. I don't think that one happens very often.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, now I'm going to ask a question though that I need to know right now. It's years have gone by, a lot of years have passed. Did you ever have to use a pick to get Cole in the lineup?
I think there was one instance. Mitch Krivelich was my assistant at the time, and I remember talking to Mitch about it. I think we had to make a pick, and I went to Mitch and said, "I'm not picking my son. There's no way. I can't do it." And he said, "Let me stop you right there." And he broke down all the scores and whatever and said, "I'm picking your son." He said, "There is no way that we can justify not putting him in the lineup, and I'm going to be mad at you if you leave him home just because he's your kid." So I think there was one instance where it was a little bit dicey, but Mitch kind of talked me off the ledge. I was ready to leave him home, but
Good job, Mitch. Good job,
yeah.
Mitch. So how did you draw the line between father versus coach? Because you had to be both. How did you draw that line? How did that work? What was the dynamic like?
I think in general, even for me in coaching, I try and treat my players like they're my kids.
Mm,
Be hard on
like,
them when I need to be hard on them, and put my arm around them when I need to put my arm around them. And I don't really think I ever. I guess in Cole's defense, maybe I was a little harder on him than some of the other players because, I don't know. I don't know if it was the reason of I didn't have to worry about being hard on him because mom or dad wasn't going to call me that night and tell me, "Hey, you're being too hard on my kid," or you know. Um, so I don't really. I feel like I treated him, like I do all my players, and to this day, I try and treat all our guys like they're my kids and hold them accountable and but yet be there and support them and help them try and get better and make good decisions in golf and in life.
that's great. I just wondered how that dynamic worked. I talked to Chuck Winstead about it at one time, and I think it would be pretty difficult. You wouldn't want to be in the position of having to pick your son a lot either. But he was used to discipline because he got that when he was at home, right?
Yep, that's for sure. For
Okay.
sure.
Well, you mentioned a couple of your former assistant coaches. I think all three of your assistant coaches at Purdue, that's Jake Amos, who was at East Tennessee and now LSU, Mitch, who is at College of Charleston, and Austin Oaf, who played for you and then was your assistant at Purdue, is now at Central Arkansas. You got to take a little bit of
And
pride in sort of having a coaching tree already. That's a pretty
Yeah,
good deal.
also not really part of my coaching tree, but was lucky enough to have Andrew Sapp as my assistant as well, who's now the head coach at Purdue. So, but he, I think when he came to Purdue for my last couple of years, it was pretty incredible to work with him because he had so much experience. He was actually my assistant coach when I was a player at North Carolina. And then, all the years passed with him being the head coach at Michigan and North Carolina and ECU. To be able to have him come be my assistant at Purdue was pretty special. And, I felt like we were just as much almost co-head coaches as anything because he's, just knows a lot about the game. But yeah, no, I definitely feel fortunate. I've had great assistant coaches, and they're all doing really good jobs right now at their respective schools. And let's face it, as a head coach, that's having good assistants is a really big deal. And you know all of the success I've had, I would contribute to them just as much as to me.
Yeah, I think a head coach is an incumbent. You have to hire somebody that's really, really good, that's going to cover all the weaknesses you have. I know I've got a ton, that they can cover those weaknesses, and the two of you together make a great team. That's what you're looking for. And I know
For
that
sure.
I didn't even think about Andrew Sapp. And by the way, he played really well in the Senior Open this summer until the last day. He played great.
He did. That was fun to follow. He's another guy. I think typically when I hire an assistant coach, I look for somebody that loves golf. I love golf, and I think, hiring somebody that didn't love golf just probably wouldn't work that great for me. I like to, talk about the guys over 9 holes in the morning sometimes, or, and all the guys, that I've hired really love the game and love to play, and have all, had pretty successful, playing careers. So, it's been fun. I think anybody that loves the game and is competitive, if once I get past that aspect of things, I feel like we can figure the rest out.
Yeah, yeah, you've had great assistant coaches, and tell me about your assistant coach right now at South Carolina.
Yeah, Brady Greger. He worked with Coach McDonald, and when I got the job at South Carolina, I feel like Brady's got young kids, and he was really he had done a great job at South Carolina, and I just felt like I needed to give him an opportunity, and we worked really well together. He certainly loves golf as well, and it's been a really nice fit. Kind of had to hit the ground running last summer, and he kind of knew the landscape from being there for a couple of years, and everything has gone great with him.
Well, that's great. I did the exact same thing when I got to Baylor. Ryan Black was the assistant coach and had been for 2 years, and I didn't even consider not letting him be my assistant coach. I thought he's going to help my transition into Waco be a lot smoother, and I'm sure that Brady has done the same thing for you. But
Yeah,
tell me,
he definitely has. Having somebody there that knows the landscape and knows the current guys, and he's helped me a lot with all of that.
well, tell me how the move came from going. You had so much success at Purdue, and the job obviously opened up when Bill McDonald finished his career. But how was the move from Purdue to South Carolina? How did that all precipitate? How did that come about?
I obviously absolutely loved Purdue, being there 11 years. Both of my kids graduated from college there. Both of them, still live in the area. Um, South Carolina, Ray Tanner had called me to see if I had interest in the job, and I just kind of felt like timing wise in my life, turning 50, and being in the SEC at Alabama for a year, and knowing what a tough conference it is, and kind of just really sat back and thought about it, and I was like, look, you want to compete. It's what's probably one of the most important things to you, is to compete. There's no better conference in the country than the SEC, from a competitive standpoint in golf. And, this is a little bit of a professional challenge. I kind of felt like at Purdue, I knew, the type of players that we were going to get. I felt like, in order to win a national championship, I think at any school you have to have kind of the cards fall in place, but I really felt like, it was being able to go to a tournament and kind of recruit. If you're at an SEC school, or a top school with great weather, I think that you can kind of go to tournaments and almost compete or recruit anybody in the field. So, that was a big deal for me. Hey, this is a professional challenge. We've kind of done a nice job at Purdue. Let's go and see what we can do at South Carolina, and see if we can kind of get things turned around and compete to win a SEC championship or a national championship. And it's been fun. It's certainly a challenge for sure.
Well, that's great. I love that. And yes, you are in a major conference, and we sent two really good teams to your conference in Texas and Oklahoma. So you're welcome for that.
Yeah, thanks. It wasn't tough enough already.
It wasn't tough. Man, I tell you what, when they left the Big 12 to go to the SEC, I thought, wow, that conference is going to be brutal. But oh well. But anyway, that's great to hear how you. I love the fact you take it as a professional challenge that you feel like you can get a team at South Carolina competitive to win either a conference or national championship or both. I wouldn't put it past you either. I know how competitive you are. But one thing we talked about when we first started this podcast was how recruiting has changed, and maybe some things are going to have changed that are not for the better as far as the way coaches get players sometimes now. But if I recruit against Rob Bradley for a player and I lose, I feel okay about it. You know why? Because I know you did it the right way, and I know that you got that player fair and square, and I don't mind losing those battles at all.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we definitely try and do things the right way, and I feel like you kind of, at the end of the day, players. I really feel like players kind of go where they're supposed to go, and if you work hard recruiting and get out there and get to know players, I do find it tough sometimes when you see these early commitments where players aren't even really getting a chance to get in front of the coaches and hear what they're about and hear what their program's about. I struggle with that a little bit. Just not even getting the opportunity to sit down with a kid and explain to them what we have going on and how things are, what they can expect when they come to school and how we're going to treat them, and talk to our players to learn about the experience that they're having and things like that. I struggle with that a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think that we'll be okay with the guys that we get, and just work hard and do the right things.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You said it best. You get who you're supposed to get. You can't worry about the ones you don't get, and you better coach the ones you do get, right?
That's right. That's right, for sure.
Well, listen, before we finish up here, first of all, I want to say thanks for being here today, but I want to find out what your fall schedule is going to be like. Are we going to run into you? Where are you going this fall?
We are going to Minnesota to the Gopher at Windsong Farms, which is a great golf course. One of the things I try and do is get our players on really good, challenging golf courses, and that is definitely one. We are starting a tournament along with the Bryan Brothers, Collegiate at Salina in Columbia at the end of September. That's going to be a really fun event. We've got some nice teams coming for a first year event. And then we are going to Daniel Island to the Bryson Invitational, which is a new tournament this year at Daniel Island, which is another really good golf course. And then we are finishing off at Fallen Oak in Biloxi. Southern Miss and Ole Miss and UNLV, I think, all kind of came together to host that tournament at Fallen Oak, and it's put on by the Beau Rivage, and it was one of my favorite events last year. The golf course is absolutely phenomenal, and they really take a lot of pride in the event, and the field's good, and it was incredible.
Yeah, Fallen Oak, pretty incredible place. And that's an interesting schedule. I love it. But I think Minnesota, Windsong Farm is one of the most underrated golf courses in college golf. You're guaranteed perfect greens. The condition of the golf course is incredible. And you can get in some trouble up there if you're not careful. What a golf course. I think way underrated.
Yeah, I thought it was I love how they do the individual tournament down the street. I thought it was a great place for our team to start. It'll kind of challenge us coming from the south and going up there on bent grass, and a really good golf course. And I think we have a really nice team this year, and Frankie Harris, I think, will be we'll have a good chance with PGA Tour use. So we tried to put together a schedule that will be great for our team, but also great for him as well. And I think we've done a nice job of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing our guys compete and Frankie compete this year as well.
That's great. Well, we're not going to see you in the fall. Hopefully we catch you someplace in the spring. But Rob, I've always respected the job you do. I've respected it from afar, basically, because we don't cross paths that often. But it was great seeing you last week at Trinity Forest, and I'm a big fan, so keep up the great job you're doing.
Thanks so much, Coach McGraw. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you again soon.